This is a reading from the Virgin Mary in the Writings of Maria Valtorta by Father Gabriel M. Roschini, OSM. Second, Mary, associate of Christ, the mediator between God and humanity. Maria Valtorta's writings show Mary intimately, indissolubly associated with Christ, the mediator, in working out both phases of our salvation. She was his associate in effecting our salvation, phase 1. She has been his associate in applying salvation to each member of humanity throughout the centuries, phase 2. In virtue of her association in effecting humanity's redemption, Mary is Co-Redemptrix with the Redeemer. In virtue of her association in applying redemption to each individual, Mary is dispenser of all graces. I will now expound at length these two fundamental questions. A. Mary, Co-Redemptrix of humanity. Mary collaborated in the acquisition of all graces. B. Mary, dispenser of all graces. A. Mary, Co-Redemptrix of humanity. Footnote 80. The earliest attestation of the title of Co-Redemptrix is found in a hymn in a 15th century manuscript in Salzburg. The title of Redemptrix, however, prevailed until the 18th century. In the 19th century, Co-Redemptrix was used about 100 times, while Redemptrix finally disappeared. At the beginning of the 20th century, Cardinal L'Épicier, OSM, more than anyone else, popularized the use of Co-Redemptrix. During St. Pius X's pontificate, Co-Redemptrix was used in 3 official Holy See documents published in the Acta Apostolicae Sedis. The first pope to use this title was Pius XI, 3 times. From now on, the term Co-Redemptrix demands our respect, René Laurentin wrote in 1931. It would be most foolhardy, to say the least, to attack its legitimacy. Le titre de Co-Redemptrix, the title of Co-Redemptrix, in Marianum number 13, 1931, page 418. As Co-Redemptrix, Mary is associated with Christ, the Redeemer, in effecting humanity's salvation, that is, in acquiring all redemptive graces. Maria Valtorta's writings shed light on the following elements: the title of Co-Redemptrix, 2. The association of Mary as Co-Redemptrix with Christ the Redeemer, 3. The mode of that association as the new Eve united to the new Adam, 4. The effects of this association, liberation from the slavery of sin and death, 5. The foundations of co-redemption, 6. The ultimate reason for co-redemption. 1. The title of Co-Redemptrix of humanity. This glorious Marian title shows up with some frequency in Maria Valtorta's writings. Poema 1, 125, 153, 2, 16, 4, 718 to 719, footnote written by her. 6, 1008, 7, 1582, 9, 308. Quaderni 1943, page 16, 190, 313, and 584 and 618. Lezioni sull'Epistola di Paolo ai Romani, a commentary on Paul's epistle to the Romans, page 86, 98, and 144. Maria Valtorta is not content using the title of Co-Redemptrix frequently. She also gives its precise meaning. Jesus dictates, "She became the Co-Redemptrix, and, therefore, the woman who ransomed the earth." Quaderni 43, page 618, December the 3rd. Co-redemption is indeed a collaboration in ransoming the earth, that is, humanity, in order to deliver us from the slavery of sin and death, brought to earth through the devil's envy. Such deliverance is achieved by means of a ransom, the merits and atonement resulting from the sacrifice of Christ and Mary. 2. The association of Mary as Co-Redemptrix with Christ, the Redeemer. Footnote 81. The principle of the Blessed Virgin's association with Christ in the whole work of redemption was taught by Pius IX, Leo XIII, St. Pius X, Pius XII, John XXIII, and Paul VI. See G. Roschini, Maria Santissima nella Storia della Salvezza, Most Holy Mary in Salvation History, Isola dei Liri, Pisani, 1969, Volume 1, pages 179 to 183. Like Christ, her son, Mary was called by God to the mission of Redemptrix, Quaderni 43, page 311, September 7th. That is why her heart, just as her son Jesus' heart, was broken by the human race, and for the sake of the human race, Quaderni 43, page 312, September the 7th, she is similar to me, a Savioress, Jesus speaking. Poema 6, page 966. You had me, Jesus says, because 33 years before I did, Mary accepted to drink the bitter cup. On the lip of the cup, I drank when I was sweating blood. I noticed the taste of my mother's lips, and the bitterness of her tears was mixed with the bitterness of my sacrifice. Believe me, to have her suffer even though she did not deserve suffering, that is what grieved me the most. I remember her life, which consisted in the martyrdom of the Co-Redemptrix. Without it, I would not have been the man among men, nor your eternal Redeemer. Quaderni 43, page 313, September the 7th. The mission of Saviors, Jesus said to Maria Valtorta, is an austere mission, the most austere of all. The life of a monk who lives according to the harshest rule is a flower compared with the heap of thorns that the life of Saviors was. Quaderni 44, page 178, February 20th. Dictation on Jesus' passion and Mary's sufferings. Jesus speaking. Mary is the testimony of God's super merciful love for mankind, because God worked the salvation of the human race through Mary, the Redeemer's mother. Quaderni 43, page 308, September the 6th. Jesus again speaking. All the grace was assembled in one woman, and she delivered it to the world, that it might be redeemed. Poema 3, 79 to 80. Mary's association with Christ the Redeemer prescribed that she renounce every motherly right she had on him. Every moment of her life, she had to remember, as she actually did, that vocation is more than blood. Poema 4, page 777. It is relevant at this point to quote a conversation between Jesus and Judas Iscariot. This was the day after Jesus made a stern discourse in Bethlehem of Galilee. The discourse did not please Judas, and he clearly said so to Jesus, because he thought it might harm Jesus. See what happened to John the Baptist, Judas says to Jesus. A martyr is always glorious, Jesus answers. But by his death he prevents himself from being a master and grieves disciples and relatives, an obvious allusion to Jesus' mother. He frees himself from every pain, but leaves others in greater suffering. Vocation is more than blood, Jesus replies. And what about the fourth commandment? Judas asks. It comes after those concerning God. You saw yesterday how a mother can suffer for her son. At this, Jesus turns to his mother. Mother, come here. Mary hastens towards Jesus and asks, What do you want, son? Mother, Judas of Iscariot is pleading your cause. He loves you and loves me. My cause? In regard to what? He wants to persuade me to be more prudent, so that I may not have to suffer like our relative John the Baptist. And he is telling me that sons must have mercy on their mothers by sparing themselves on their behalf, because that is what the fourth commandment prescribes. What do you say? You may speak, mother, so that you may kindly instruct our Judas. I say that I would no longer love my son as God, that I would begin to doubt whether I have always been mistaken, and whether I have always been deceived concerning his nature, if I saw him fail in his perfection by lowering his thought to human consideration, losing sight of superhuman considerations, that is, the redemption, the effort to redeem men for their own sake and for the glory of God, at the cost of procuring for himself affliction and hatred. His mission is greater than any other that was, is, or ever will be on the earth, and he certainly has from God suitable assistance for such a great mission. Judas, who is short of arguments, bends to lace a sandal and is left behind. Poema 4, page 777 to 778. Mary's association with Christ lasted throughout his whole redemptive life, in the beginning, as it unfolded, and in the end. When you think about Mary, Jesus says, I would like you all to meditate on her agony. It lasted 33 years and climaxed at the foot of the cross. She went through that for you. Poema 9, page 16. The Blessed Virgin said, We mothers are always united to our sons. Poema 4, page 765. Mary associated with Christ in the beginning of his redemptive life. Mary's association with Christ began with his very entry into the world to redeem it, an entry due to Mary. At that moment, redemption began with her sacrifice. Jesus speaking, Quaderni 43, page 307, September the 6th. I renounced my son, Mary speaking, from the very moment I had him. I gave him to God. I gave him to you. Poema 1, page 192. At the Annunciation, the angel's last words to Mary were, "The world, heaven, the eternal Father are awaiting your word." Poema 1, page 105, footnote 82. It is worthwhile to quote Valtorta's description of the angel's appearance to the Blessed Virgin. And in such light, the archangel prostrates himself. The angel must necessarily take a human appearance, but is it a transhumanized appearance? Of what flesh is this beautiful and gleaming figure made? With what substance did God form it to make it perceptible to the senses of the Virgin? Only God can possess such substances and use them so perfectly. It is a face, a body, eyes, a mouth, hair and hands like ours, but they are not our dull matter. It is a light that has taken the color of flesh, of eyes, hair, lips, a light that moves and smiles, looks and speaks. Poema, chapter 1, verse 1, page 103. She did pronounce that word, footnote 83. Behold, the handmaid of the Lord, be it done unto me according to your word. Luke chapter 1, verse 38, Douay. But at the cost of what suffering? Mary's great sorrow was fundamental, sovereign, and absolute, Jesus says. It entered her as violently as a meteor, dashing down from heaven at the very moment she was ecstatically embraced by the creative spirit. Footnote 84. This refers to the moment Our Lady conceived the incarnate Word, the Redeemer, through the Holy Spirit. Happiness and suffering meshed together and were tied around Mary's heart. This began at the very moment she uttered her supreme, "Let it be done," the moment of her most chaste marriage. Happiness and suffering were but one thing, as she had become one with God. Since she was called to the mission of a Redemptrix, from the start, her suffering was more acute than her beatitude. Her beatitude was fulfilled only when she was assumed into heaven. Mary was united to the Spirit of wisdom. He revealed her child's destiny to her. After this, Mary no longer had joy in the ordinary meaning of the word. While deeply hidden in her womb, drawing life from her virginal blood, every hour that went by, I had ineffable love conversations with my mother. Despite that, her heart was continually filled with incomparable love and suffering that rose like waves in a stormy sea, lashing her furiously. My mother's heart was wounded by the sword of suffering, from the time when light, coming down from the heart of the one and triune fire, penetrated into her to usher in God's incarnation and the redemption of humanity. This wound was deepened every hour that went by during the holy gestation. The divine blood came into being from a source of human blood. The Son's heartbeat accompanied the Mother's heartbeat. His eternal flesh developed from the immaculate flesh of the Blessed Virgin. Footnote 85. Elsewhere, Jesus speaks about Mary's love for him. Immediately after conception, oh, what caresses she gave me through her virginal flesh, while I was still shapeless and tiny, throbbing inside of her with my little embryonic heart. Oh, what heartbeats did I communicate to her heart through the obscure embryonic tissue, in the depth of that living tabernacle where I was taking shape, in order to be born for you and die for you, crucifying my mother's heart on my own cross for your sakes. Quaderni 43, page 25, June the 4th. Her grief was yet greater when I was born to be the light of the world of darkness. Mothers are happy when they hug their children, but for Mary, hugging me meant that her own martyrdom was drawing nearer. Her maternal heart deserved all the joy a sinless Adam would have obtained. But for your sakes, I had to smite her with every suffering. For your sakes, she had to suffer when Joseph was upset. For your sakes, she gave birth in dire poverty. For your sakes, Simeon's prophecy turned the knife in the wound, reopening and deepening the sword's bite. For your sakes, she was exiled into a foreign land, For your sakes she suffered all the anxieties of her lifetime. Quaderni 43, page 311 to 312, September the 7th. I knew what was my destiny. The Blessed Virgin told Maria Valtorta. I knew it because I did not fail to know what was the Redeemer's destiny. The prophecies spoke about his great suffering. The Spirit of God, united to me, gave me more light than the prophecies did. That is why, as soon as I said, I am the handmaid of the Lord, I had embraced suffering at the same time as love. Already I felt much grief when I saw that men would take goodness made flesh to cause evil for themselves. Quaderni 44, page 359, May 20th. The Seven Sorrows of Mary. Jesus said, "The let it be done." Those are the words that drew me from heaven into Mary's womb and put me on the cross to redeem the world. Quaderni 43, page 111, June 30th. The Blessed Virgin's soul was deeply tormented also when she witnessed Joseph's passion. Joseph suffered much when he discovered that Mary was mysteriously with child. Matthew chapter 1, verses 18 to 25. Mary called it their first passion, which lasted several days. Oh, our first passion! Who can feel its intimate and silent intensity? Who can describe my pain when I realized that heaven had not yet heard my prayer by revealing the mystery to Joseph? I understood that he was not aware of it when I saw that he was respectful to me as usual. If he had known that I bore in me the Word of God, he would have adored that Word enclosed in my womb with the acts of veneration which are due to God, and which he would not have failed to accomplish, as I would not have refused to receive, not for my own sake, but for him who was within me, and that I bore, as the Ark of the Alliance carried the stone code and the vases of manna. Who can measure my struggle against the dismay that endeavored to overwhelm me in order to convince me that I had hoped in vain in the Lord? Oh, I think it was the furious rage of Satan. I perceived doubt rising behind my back and stretching its icy claws to imprison my soul and prevent it from praying. Doubt is so dangerous and lethal to the spirit. It is lethal because it is the first agent of the deadly disease called despair, against which we must react with all our strength, so that our souls may not perish and we may not lose God. Who can truly tell Joseph's pain, his thoughts, the perturbation of his feelings? Like a little boat caught in a great storm, he was in a vortex of conflicting ideas, in a turmoil of reflections of which one was more piercing and painful than the other. He was, to all appearances, a man betrayed by his wife. He saw his good reputation and the esteem of his world collapse around him. Because of her, he saw scornful fingers pointed at himself and felt pitied by the village people. Above all, he perceived that his love and esteem for me had fallen, struck to death, before the evidence of a deed. In this respect, his holiness shines brighter than mine, and I give this witness with the affection of a spouse, because I want you to love my Joseph, this wise, prudent, patient, and good man, who is not separated from the mystery of redemption. On the contrary, he is closely connected to it, because he suffered for it, consuming himself in sorrow for it, saving your Savior at the cost of his own sacrifice because of his holiness. Had he not been so holy, he would have acted in a human way, denouncing me as an adulteress. But Joseph was holy. His pure spirit lived in God. Poema 1, pages 165 to 166. One may wonder why Mary never told Joseph about her divine maternity. If God had not said to me, "Be silent," I would probably have dared to say to Joseph, with my face bowed to the ground, "The Spirit has penetrated me, and now the embryo of God is in me." And he would have believed me, because he held me in high esteem, and because, like those who never lie, he could not believe that others lied. Yes, to avoid hurting his feelings in future, I would have overcome my reluctance to praise myself, but I obeyed the divine command, and for months after that moment, I felt the first wound pierce my heart. It was the first pain in my destiny of co-redeemer. I offered and suffered it in atonement. Poema 1, page 125. When Joseph finally learned about the mystery from the angel, he asked Mary to forgive him, for having thoughts of divorcing her in secret. See Matthew chapter 1, verse 19. At that Mary answered, I have nothing for which to forgive you. On the contrary, I ask you to forgive me for the pain I caused you. Oh yes, it was a great pain. What a torture. Look, I was told this morning that my temples are white-haired and my face wrinkled. These past 3 days have been more than 10 years of my life. But why, Mary, have you been so humble as to conceal your glory from me, your spouse, and thus allow me to suspect you? Joseph is not on his knees, but he is bent so low that he is as good as kneeling down, and Mary lays her tiny hand on his head and smiles. She seems to be absolving him, and she whispers, If I had not been humble in the most perfect manner, I would not have deserved to conceive the expected one who is coming to pay for the sin of pride that ruined man. And then I obeyed. God had requested such obedience. It cost me so much, because of you, because of the pain that you were to suffer, but I could but obey. I am the handmaid of the Lord, and servants do not discuss the orders they receive. They fulfill them, Joseph, even if they cause bitter tears. Mary weeps quietly while speaking, so quietly that Joseph, bent down as he is, does not notice it until a tear falls on the floor. He then lifts his head, and it is the first time I see him do this. He presses Mary's little hands in his dark, strong ones, and he kisses the tips of the rosy, slender fingers that protrude like fresh buds of a peach tree from the circle formed by his own hands. Now we shall have to arrange for... Joseph does not say anything else, but he looks at Mary's body, and she becomes purple and sits suddenly, to avoid her figure being exposed to eyes watching her. We shall have to make haste. I will come here. We will complete the wedding. Next week, is that all right? Whatever you do is all right, Joseph. You are the head of the family. I am your servant. No, I am your servant. I am the happy servant of my Lord. Poema, Book 1, pages 169 to 170. Mary associated with Christ during his redemptive life. Mary was associated with Christ throughout his redemptive life. Jesus says, sorrow has been our faithful friend, and it had all the most varied forms and names. Poema 1, page 245. Okay, I'll read up to the public ministry. Mary associated with Jesus during his private life. Jesus said to Maria Valtorta, Mary's days of suffering were like a necklace being made. A new pearl was added daily. In the end, she met with Golgotha. Quaderni 43, page 618, December the 3rd. Since she was deprived of the most necessary things, Mary gave her child milk and tears, milk and love. Poema 1, page 208. The Blessed Virgin told the seer that the child's first gaze fell on his dear mother, and his first word was, Mommy. He took his first steps with his little tender feet that were pinkish like the petals of a flesh-colored rose. I used to caress those little feet and kiss them with motherly love and a worshipper's adoration. One day they would be nailed to the cross, and I would see them contract out of pain, turn ashen and ice-cold. When he began to walk by himself, he would fall. I would run over to lift him up and kiss his bruises. I could do it then, but one day I would see him fall under his cross. He would be agonizing. He would be torn, blood-stained and covered with refuse thrown at him by a cruel crowd. I would not be able to run to him and lift him up then, nor kiss his bleeding wounds. I would be the poor mother of a poor, tortured son. His first acts of kindness towards me, he would pick little flowers in our small garden or along the road and bring them to me. He would drag a footstool and put it under my feet so I would be more comfortable. He would pick up something I had dropped. His smile was the sunshine of our home. It was the riches that covered my little home's bare walls with gold and silk. Whoever sees my son's smile has seen paradise on earth. As long as he was a child, his smile was serene. As he grew into an adult, his smile became more and more pensive until such time it became sad. But he always had a smile for everyone. His smile was one of his divine charms, which crowds delighted, followed him for. His smile was already a loving word. When his voice was added to his smile, even clods of soil and wheat stems quivered. The world has never heard another voice as beautiful. It was God's voice speaking. How could Judas and the Jews end up betraying Jesus and kill him after hearing him speak? Only God's unfathomable design can explain such a mystery. His intelligence developed until it became perfect. I was filled with awe when I beheld this. His intelligence was tempered by such goodness that he never humiliated anyone. My sweet son, how kind you were. You were kind with all, especially with your mother. When he became a young man, I refrained from hugging him as when he was a little boy, but I was never deprived of his kisses or caresses. He himself would invite me to drink of his life, kissing his holy flesh. He understood my thirst for love, and I would drink of his joy. Quaderni 43, page 635-36, December the 8th. Mary's anguish when she lost 12-year-old Jesus on the way back from the Paschal pilgrimage to the temple in Jerusalem was indescribable. It was 3 days of agony, Poema 1, pages 293-294. The torment of Mary's heart when St. Joseph died was indescribable also. For 30 years, Joseph was her father, her spouse, her brother, her friend, her protector. Poema 1, page 302. After his death, she felt as lonely as the shoot of a vine when the tree to which it is tied is cut down. Ibid.